So you've got a product or service to sell and you're looking to drive more business. And you want to advertise on podcasts to get in front of your target audience. I think it's a good idea. Podcasts are one of the fastest growing channels right now, and they're great for advertising because listeners really trust their favorite hosts. But how do you find the right podcasts? And how do you pitch them? These days, you don't need to spend hours trawling podcast apps or Google looking for suitable podcasts and getting their contact information. Raphonic.com is a database containing millions of podcasts designed to save you time finding and pitching the right shows. We have a free trial available, so you can give it a try, but even if you don't use Raphonic, you should follow these 6 steps to advertise on podcasts. You can find all of the links I'll mention in the video description below. So let's get started. Step 1. You need to search for podcasts that align with your brand. Let's say you're trying to get more downloads for a new fitness app. One of the ways to find suitable podcasts to sponsor is to Google fitness podcasts or open Spotify or Apple Podcasts and search for your keyword and see what comes up. See if it's still publishing new episodes by looking at the dates of recent episodes, and check if they accept sponsors by looking through the show notes or their website for clues. To find relevant shows with Raphonic, enter your keyword in the search bar and hit enter. Select the filter Active to only see shows that have published a new episode in the last 45 days, and then Sponsored to only see shows that are most likely to be accepting sponsors. There are lots of other filters you might want to use to narrow down your search even further. For example, the category. Listener numbers are particularly helpful because if you haven't yet built up a reputation in the industry, you can start at the lower end. If you're more well known, you can consider bigger shows. Now, let's say you already have a show in mind that you think is a good fit for your business. For example, here's a show called Between the Reps. You can use Raphonic's free graph tool to find other podcasts that share a similar audience. You can see the clusters and connections and then dive deeper, finding sponsorship opportunities that you might not have thought about because they're not as obvious. Step 2. Check the podcast stats to make sure it's worth reaching out to. You want to gauge listener numbers, engagement, social reach, audience gender skew, chart rankings, and maybe more. If the podcast has a website, take a look to see if it has a sponsorship page or media kit. It might provide listener numbers, average ratings, chart rankings, and other information. But the chances are that you'll have to email them asking for more information about the podcast performance and audience. If they email you back, you might find that it's just not a good match for your brand and you've just wasted a bit of your time. With Raphonic, it's really easy to qualify a show because everything is all listed in one place. You might have already used the filters for some of these, but if not, you may want to check listener numbers, we already talked about that, engagement score, you ideally want to get in front of an engaged audience, audience location. If your target audience is based in the US, there's no point in sponsoring a show with a primarily Australian audience. Social reach. Podcasts tend to repurpose episodes for social media, so it's another way to boost your exposure. Ratings and reviews. See what people are saying about the show. Do they like it? Gender skew. Again, make sure it matches your target audience. Chart rankings. It's another gauge of popularity. Step 3. Make sure it's within budget. There's no point pitching a show if it's going to be wildly outside your budget. It's a waste of your time and theirs. Some shows might list ad costs on their website or media pack, which makes your life a lot easier. If they publicly reveal their listener numbers, you can get an idea of costs by calculating it yourself. The standard costs per 1,000 listeners, or CPM as it's called, is between $18 and $25. So if they say they have 10,000 listeners, multiply each of these CPMs by 10 to get a range. If you're using Raphonic, we've done the hard work for you and have estimated the cost per ad for almost every show in our database, meaning you can see at a glance if it's likely to be within your budget or not. If it is, start building a list of shows that you're going to pitch. When you're on the podcast page in Raphonic, hit the button Add to List, then create a new list and give it a name. You can then add other shows to this list and keep track of where you are in the pitching and sponsorship process with them. Step 4. Determine the podcast ad type and delivery method you want to use. When it comes to ad types, there's host-read and programmatic ads. Host-read is where the host reads out a script that you've written, and programmatic means that you're in charge of recording and producing it yourself. If you choose host-read, you can either be pre-recorded or the host reads it live during the episode. As for the delivery method, there are baked-in podcast ads and dynamic podcast ads. Baked in means the ad is permanently included as part of the podcast episode, whereas dynamic means that the ad is temporarily inserted into specific episodes and then taken out, usually when an agreed number of impressions is reached. A lot of shows stick to one ad type and delivery method, So make sure you find out exactly what the deal is when corresponding with the podcast hosts. You may even want to prioritize shows that do it in your preferred way, which means listening to a few episodes first. Step 5, get the contact information and reach out to the podcast host. You can search for contacts on Google, or if the podcast has a website, you can use a tool like Hunter to find email addresses. In Raphonic, we have email addresses available for almost every show. And if you can't see what you're looking for, you can ask our concierge team and they'll find better contacts for you. Next, it's time to draft your pitch. If you're good with words, you can do this yourself. And if not, you can use one of Raphonic's templates that's specific to pitching a show as a sponsor. Make sure your pitch is personalized and captures their attention, which means that listening to a couple of episodes first is a good idea. You need to highlight why their audience would be interested in what you have to offer, so that they can immediately see you as being a good fit. Send your pitch, and if you don't hear back from them in a few days, send a follow-up email. Step 6, write your ad. There are many different ways to structure an ad, and I've included a link to our guide on how to write a podcast ad script in the description below. But one of the most popular ad structures goes like this. First, you hook the listener. You want to grab their attention and make them receptive to your message or whatever is coming next.
There are things to be gazelle intense about, making healthier choices, getting out of debt for sure. But when it comes to giving people what they need from you, it's better to be intentional, not intense.
Then talk about their pain point. What's inconveniencing them at the moment? Or what specific problem are they facing right now?
Because it's easy to get caught up in what people need from you and never give a thought to what you need. So how do you balance the two?
The next part is highlighting the benefits of your product or service. What are the outcomes that the listener will experience by using it?
It takes practice, and therapy is a great way to learn new skills like finding balance and setting boundaries that allow you to have enough energy left to help others without leaving yourself behind.
Finish your ad off with a clear call to action. What do you want the listener to do after they hear your ad? Do you want them to visit your website and make a purchase? Do you want them to download something? Whatever it is, tell them exactly how to do it.
So find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/Deloney today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Deloney.
Once your ad is ready, send it to the podcast host and monitor the results once it's live. Now that you know how to get the most out of podcast advertising, if you're ready to take the next step and start looking for suitable podcasts, head to Raphonic.com and give Raphonic a try for free. It'll save you tons of time and help you maximize your return on investment. Catch you again soon.